everybody, and welcome back to the Content Mix. I'm Carlota Pico, your host for today's show, and I'm excited to introduce Payam Edalat, who is Global Communication Social Media Producer at Philip Morris International and has over 9 years of experience in marketing and communications. Welcome, Payam, and thank you so much for joining us today on the Content Mix.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm really excited to talk to you.
I'm excited as well. Let's dive straight into the interview then. Payam, could you tell me a little bit about your background and how you got into your current role?
Yeah, of course. It's a bit of a different one, actually, because I went into industry before I did my degree. So I started my career in journalism, actually, in 2011. Wow, 9 years ago. It's strange thinking that was 9 years ago now. But so I was fresh out of sixth form, having completed my A-level. So that's college level education at that point. And I applied for an 11-month internship at Sky, which is a broadcaster in the UK and outside of actually in Europe as well. It was a great scheme. You were either placed with the entertainment team, production, graphics, sports, or news. And it was a hugely popular program, but I was lucky enough to get the position at Sky News. And then I was there for a year where I spent time with correspondents, with cameramen, news desks, but ultimately it was the digital team where I spent most of my internship, and that paved the way to where I am today. Because back then social media hadn't really, I don't want to say it didn't exist, but it hadn't really taken off for large companies and news organizations. So Sky News, for instance, had a Facebook page and a Twitter page with very few followers, and that's all it was, which is, completely different to today, where I think they're past 10 million followers across platforms. So yeah, that's kind of where I started, and I worked through the different departments there, and then went on to do my degree, having been there for a year. And then throughout my degree, which I did in journalism, I worked at Sky sort of part-time. So I was there on evenings, weekends, holidays, which was a really cool job to actually have, compared to my friends who are working in bars or retail and that sort of thing. So I was very, very fortunate in that way.
Okay, excellent. Well, your background is similar to mine as well, because I'm actually a journalist by education. And I started off in print communication and print PR. I was doing PR campaigns for emerging markets that were distributed through mainstream media channels, but print media channels. And now, obviously, I'm in the digital world of marketing. So I'm going to zoom into that a little bit. So going from Sky News to a leading tobacco company, what's your day-to-day like now?
Yeah, so our day-to-day is sort of made up of reactive and proactive tasks. So we start off our day with morning meeting and newsjacking. So this is where we look through all the PMI-related and industry-related news coverage from the previous 24 hours. And then we discuss whether there are any that we want to sort of look into any more detail or amplify. So that's very much reactive. And then the rest of the day, we work very much like a newsroom, which is handy. We're coming up with messaging and writing messaging, working with designers on creative campaigns to tell the PMI story. But we're also very much poised to spring into reactive mode when the need arises, when news comes up that's PMI related and we need to react.
Okay, very interesting. So then let's say that all of a sudden you were promoted, which I'm sure you will be promoted at some point, and you're tasked with finding a new candidate for your role. What type of qualities and skills would you look for in that new candidate?
Ooh, that's a good one. First off, do you know something I don't know? Because if you do, let me know. I can go and do some shopping. It'll be great.
You might be interviewing me, actually. Who knows?
Come along. But skills needed for this type of job, I think it's really important to have experience outside of marketing and to have experience outside of social media. So you're bringing something to the table that someone else in your position might not be bringing. So Yeah, anything else. It doesn't even need to be news or print or broadcast or anything. It could be anything to do with science. That would be super useful. It could be to do with law. Again, really useful. Anything that you bring to the table, I think, in any job that's different to the role that you're going to would be really handy. The other thing that's important is accuracy. Accuracy is hugely important for um, not just working in obviously working anywhere, accuracy is important, but when you work for a tobacco company, everything that you do is scrutinized, and rightly so. It should be. Every post, every tweet, every message that goes out is looked at and has the potential to have wider business ramifications. So accuracy is hugely important. Anything that you say, you've got to make sure that you've cross-checked with legal representatives and with science, and making sure that what you're saying is truthful, really. So yeah, those accuracy and bringing something new to the table, that's really the key to this role.
Okay, and I'm sure having worked for Sky News definitely came in handy when it comes to accuracy, because the news is all about that, right? To not have an opinion and deliver the news straightforward and as it is.
Yeah. Yeah, so as you say, accuracy, a newsroom really enforces that. It's just as important, if not more so, when you're working for a multinational company, especially when it's tobacco. But also, aside from that, the newsroom prepared me for a few things. If you think about journalism, what is it? It's storytelling at the end of it. That's all there is to it. And actually working on television output taught me the number one rule of storytelling, and that's to put people at the heart of everything that you do, because that's what essentially we all engage with. And if you think about where I was before, every day you're writing news and you're writing stories about people. PMI story is very similar. There are more than a billion smokers in the world. This company, which has been the biggest tobacco company in the world for many years now, is going through what I believe would be a historic transformation. It's transitioning away from cigarettes towards alternatives that are better for those people who don't quit. So that's, there is an opportunity there to make a huge difference to public health.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm quite excited to play a role in telling that story, as small as that role may be.
Okay. I do want to pick your brain a little bit. What was it like to go from a newsroom to the corporate world, and also not only the corporate world, but a leading tobacco company?
Yeah, it was a lot to swallow. First of all, it was very difficult for me to leave Sky News. I was there from such a young age. I think I was about 17 when I started there.
Wow.
That there was a joke circulating that I was born in one of the edit suites, which obviously isn't true, but I was there for a really long time. So it was really difficult to leave there, working with really amazing people. And when you work in a news organization, you're constantly being hounded by PR people, you're being sent stories, and it becomes tiring. So now I'm on the other side. I've become that person who's constantly hounding news organizations, talking to them. So that was quite tricky to deal with, becoming the person on the other side of the table. And also, when you work in journalism, you're someone who is quite used to asking questions, asking difficult questions. And tobacco company has a very checkered past. Obviously, they've been producing a product that is detrimental to people's health. The company accepts that, and they're trying to move away from it. So that's what really drew me to it. I understand that it's, everyone's going to be skeptical when they hear that the world's biggest tobacco company is trying to move away from cigarettes. And it's a difficult thing to deal with when a lot of people that I've met working in the company have family members whose lives have been changed because of, addiction to cigarettes. But I do think that and this is what really helped me make that transition, is I do believe that if the company is genuine about this, there is a huge opportunity to make a difference to the health of millions of people around the world.
Mm-hmm. Now, there's a lot of noise out there, so I want to focus on social networks, which is your area of strength and also your part of your current role right now. So, what are some tactics that you use to attract the right type of attention to your brand, considering that there's so much noise right now across different social media channels worldwide, especially during Corona times? I mean, all of us have just taken to our social channels to voice our opinions, to market our brands, but that doesn't necessarily mean that we're being read by anybody. So,
No, no, absolutely. It is strange because social media is something where you don't get immediate feedback. I mean, you do get sort of likes and shares and that sort of thing, but you're not really, unless someone is commenting, you're not getting immediate feedback whereas you would with other industries. So it's a case of making sure that you're up to date with everything that's going on with social. The media landscape, the social media landscape is constantly evolving and it's still so new. There are platforms that keep popping up, and there are existing platforms that keep changing their functionality. So it's mainly a case of making sure you're up to date with those, taking advantage of all of the new functionality that these various social media platforms are providing you with. And then when you're communicating, you've got to figure out who your audience is. Because if you don't know who you're talking to, then you don't know how to tailor your content towards them. So that's really what our number one priority is, to make sure we know who we're talking to with every post. You could be talking to different people in different posts. That's absolutely fine because you've got a wide range of people that you are communicating with, and one message doesn't necessarily resonate with all of them,
yeah.
but different messages might resonate with different people. So as long as you're ticking those boxes and the messaging that you're doing is varied to meet the needs of those who are looking at your content, then you're on the right tracks.
Okay, what about as a former journalist, what are some
Yeah.
storytelling techniques that you would offer to our audience to help them guide
Yeah.
them through their social network challenges?
There is one number one rule, and I think I touched on it briefly, and that is people. You just have to make sure that whatever you do, you've got people at the heart of everything that you're posting. Whether you're working for a news story, say, it's some government policy, there's the government policy and you're telling, giving the update, but you have to tell people how it affects them. And it's exactly the same with what we do at PMI on our social media. Is we are communicating that this is our change, but this is how it could affect you directly. So that's really really important, is that you put people at the center of everything you do. You've got to think about the type of content that you would personally engage with. What was the last thing that you shared that was made by a third party? I would guarantee you shared it because it triggered some sort of emotion. It made you happy, or made you sad, or laugh, or it gave you a sense of pride. Emotions are what we all have in common. So you've got to try and include it in your work.
Beautifully put. Emotions is what we all have in common. I couldn't agree with that more. Okay, so I'm
Yeah.
going to throw a curveball at you.
Well done.
What
Okay, number one.
what are your thoughts on TikTok and Microsoft's potential new acquisition of TikTok? Because I mean, they're going from one side of the spectrum to the other side of the spectrum. Microsoft bought LinkedIn, but TikTok is all about Generation Z consumers. It's a completely different type of audience.
Yeah, no, it's actually really exciting to watch because it does two things for me. It not only feeds the part of my brain that's interested in social media, but it also feeds my sort of news junkie brain as well, because there's so much in it. There's the whole China's relations with the US come in, and with the West in general. You bring Trump into it, and his comments, that he wants the US public to have a cut of the sale. So it's fascinating. It really is fascinating, but it's not unheard of for big companies, huge recognizable companies, to find these newcomers and take them over. We saw the same with Instagram when Facebook took it over. It's been the same with MySpace. But it's what happens with it next that's really fascinating, because it's whether Microsoft will then take TikTok and bring it up to a level like Instagram and Facebook and Twitter, and bring it up to that stage, or whether it takes it and changes it to something that doesn't appeal to its initial audience anymore.
Yeah.
We've got to remember TikTok, why it started. Then it is extraordinary the way that it sort of exploded, and I would love to see it sort of continue to evolve. It would be really sad to see it go away, because it's engaged a whole new generation with sharing stories.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, social media addiction is a huge problem, and we've got to be mindful of restricting access of young people to by time. You want them to have a varied life of going outside and education, all of this, but essentially what TikTok is another storytelling platform. And it's exciting that another young generation are finding new and creative ways to communicate a story. So I'd love for it to sort of be taken over by Microsoft and turn into something really amazing.
Yeah, I'm actually really excited to see what Microsoft is going to do with TikTok. Just because, they acquired LinkedIn, which is a completely B2B type of platform for professionals, right? Business to professionals. And now it wants to acquire, or rumor is that it wants to acquire TikTok. And I don't really know how that's going to fit into their business model. So I'm quite excited.
Because when you think, it is exciting, because when you think of Microsoft, you think business, you think LinkedIn. You don't think, fun-loving sort of videos of people singing and mouthing songs. So it'd be fascinating to see whether they will give it a more of a sort of adult feel to it, or whether they just sort of keep it separate completely and let it develop in its own way. But it is really exciting to watch.
It might be their way of tapping into the new generations as well, and getting them to back the Microsoft brand through TikTok. That could definitely
be. Absolutely. Because Xbox was another. I think that was their first attempt at trying to get into that younger generation, and it was very successful, you could argue. But there's a lot of competition, whereas TikTok, I think, there's a lot of competition with social media, but specifically with short video sharing and this sort of thing. It's a very unique platform.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Or it could also just be a phase, right? We saw Snapchat going off the roof. Just skyrocketing, and everybody using it. And it was like a buzzword. And then all of a sudden, people were just over it. So I guess we'll tell. Okay.
Yeah, only time will tell.
To finish off this section of the interview, I'd like to ask you for your advice for recent graduates. So let's say you had to do it all over again. What would you change? And what have you learned?
Don't be afraid to take time out. So that's definitely what I did. I took time out. I was going to go into law before I went to Sky. So when I was doing my A-levels and I applied for this internship, if I didn't get it, I would have studied law somewhere, and I would have been working in a law practice. And I can't think of, no offense to all my lawyer friends and all the lawyers out there who might be watching, but really it wouldn't have been for me. I would have not enjoyed my life. So don't be afraid to take some time out, spend some time thinking about really what it is that you want. I had friends on my journalism degree who left a career in medicine, who left a career in law, because they were sort of forced into going down that route, but it wasn't what they wanted to do. So really think about what it is that you want to do, and take some time out. Take a year out, go and explore, maybe do a couple internships, or work some work experience in whatever the industry is that you are considering, but might not be your first choice at the moment, to figure out, because you're making a decision that's going to set the path for the rest of your life. So make sure it's the one that will keep you happy.
Yeah, gosh, that kind of sends like chills up my arms. I already made my decision, but still, like, what a hard decision to make.
Yeah, it's huge, isn't it? It's huge. There's so much pressure on young people who are coming out of A-levels, deciding, I keep saying A-levels, but are they called A-levels everywhere else? I don't know. College is what I mean.
University, college.
Yeah. Or coming out of education, full-time education, and they don't know what to do. They're being pressured from parents, from teachers, all around them, telling them, this is what you got to do, this is what you got to do. But you don't want them to silence the little voice in their own heads.
Yeah, definitely. Sorry, A-levels refers to high school for our audience.
Yeah, kind of. Yeah. Yeah, the stage before university
Yeah.
diplomas and whatnot.
Yeah, because in the States, I went to university in the States, and
Yeah.
university can be substituted for college as well. So it's college or
Yes,
university, but
exactly.
basically it's a BA, right? It's a degree. It's a
Yeah.
bachelor's degree normally, or whatever type of degree. But A level tends to be
Yeah.
high school, and that's
High
where
school. Yeah.
yeah, and that's
The trouble comes in the UK because high school we would do our GCSEs and then you would go on to do your A levels for another 2 years. But I'm sure the stage before you get your BA is what I'm referring to. Yeah.
I mean, this is a perfect case of how culture plays a role in
Yeah.
storytelling and in content, right? Like,
Yeah.
you say
Hugely.
A levels, I say high school, someone else says
Exactly.
international baccalaureate, the IB levels,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
So
Exactly.
this is a perfect
Exactly.
case of how to tie it
Yeah.
all in together, right? To the beginning of our conversation. Okay, moving into our set of rapid fire questions. It's basically your
Ooh.
recommendations to our audience. To get this
Yeah.
section started off, Payam, I'd like to ask you about your source of inspiration. So a professional role model, an influencer, someone who has really impacted you throughout your career.
There is a so okay. When you say rapid fire, how quick do my answers need to be?
Like 2 seconds.
Okay. There's a journalist called Jon Snow. He's on Channel 4 in the UK. When I was little, I was always watching him on TV.
Okay, very sweet. Actually, my equivalent would be Katie Couric from CBS Evening News. That's who I
Yeah,
was
yeah,
when
yeah,
I was younger. And I actually interned for CBS Evening News later on in my career while I was still
Oh,
in
that's
university.
amazing.
So it was like a nice little full circle.
Yeah. No, Jon Snow is brilliant. He's known for his colourful socks and ties. So yeah, he's a really colourful character. I haven't met him yet. I wish I'd met him in my journalism days. He might not want to meet me now. I don't know.
Well, the world needs more color, so bring it
Yeah,
on.
exactly.
Okay, what about a book, a group, or a publication that you'd like to recommend?
A book that I would recommend. I've recently finished. There's two. So Frank McCourt's Angela's Ashes, beautiful book about growing up in Ireland and in poverty. Really beautiful. And then he goes on for the sequel, which isn't as good, but you sort of need to see what happens next. And then the other thing is Homegoing by Yaa Gyasi, which is a stunning book. Her use of language to create an image in your head is outstanding. So those are two books.
Okay, beautiful. And to finish up this section and also the last question of today's interview, what's your favorite app at the moment and why?
I really like Ground News. They are very tailored to your sort of interests, and it's something that I look at every morning. They send me notifications at, I think it's 7:30 or 8 a.m., and it's the first thing I read every time, whenever I wake up, every morning.
Okay, excellent. Well, Payam, thank you so much for joining us on the Content Mix. It was awesome to pick your brain and to learn about your experience.
It's been my pleasure. Thank you so much for having me.
And thank you, everyone, for listening in today. For more perspectives on the content marketing industry in Europe, check out the Content Mix. We'll be releasing interviews just like this one every week, so keep on tuning in. Thanks again. Have a fabulous day and see you next time. Bye.